Hi, I'm Rana. Now we're going to start Module 3. Now, in Modules 3 and 4, we're going to actually construct a financial plan, and you're going to understand how to construct a financial plan in these two modules. Now, this is pretty dense stuff, actually, so we'll go about it systematically, you and I, and here's what I'm going to ask of you. Be your good research yourself. Be detail-oriented, be methodical. We'll walk through it step by step together. Before we get started, let me offer two constraints. Constraint number one, that you have something cool. I'm assuming you've got something cool that you've made. Meaning you've got a molecule, or you have a device, or you have some really cool data. Or you wouldn't be watching this because you're looking at this and thinking, this is pretty cool. How do I take this forward? I think I can do a lot for people. That's number one. Number two is that you have the answer to three questions. One, what's the need in the marketplace for whatever you have that's cool? Not the want, not the interest, not the cool factor, but the need. You have identified who needs this. Number two, you've identified who your customer is. Who needs this? Your customer and all the stakeholders around your customer. There are always other parties that are interested in this coming to market. Number three, the value proposition. The value proposition is why somebody's going to write you a check for your solution of whatever it is that you've made. Now, there's a process called customer discovery. If you get on the web, type in customer discovery, you'll find books, articles, videos about how to engage in customer discovery to answer these three questions. This is a very, very important process. And by the way, it can take months. It should take months. It requires you to go out into the street, talk to your customers and all of your stakeholders and learn the answers to these three questions. But what it does is it validates your hypotheses, because you think you know why people are going to need this, but the fact is it's an iterative process of revisiting your hypotheses and accepting or rejecting some of them to determine why they really need it and what the value proposition is. Also, in so doing, you gather a huge treasure of assumptions that are so valuable before you embark on your financial plan. So, three things. You need the need in the marketplace, who's the customer, and the value proposition. I'm assuming you've answered those three questions. In Module 1, I introduced two words, time and money. Time and money, constraints. So now those words are going to come back and help us, because now we're going to calculate your burn rate. Well, a burn rate is the amount of money that you spend in a given period of time. And what are we talking about? We're talking about the obvious things of your salary, travel, clinical trials, product development. All of these constitute your burn rate, which we're now going to calculate. What we're going to do is identify different points in your venture's lifespan and find out how much does it cost to reach those various points and add up those figures in order to find out what a monthly, quarterly, or annual burn rate is. Now, classically, how do we do this? Well, classically we do it one of two ways. One, as I just indicated, maybe you open up a spreadsheet and you say, all right, here are my line items, salaries, clinical trials, travel, etc. And by week or by month, you start filling in those numbers until they march across the page. And then at the end of the year, you say, oh, that's how much we're going to spend. That's one. Number two, all too often we look at each other, or we look at the ceiling, and we look at each other, and we say, what do you think? I think we're going to spend $200,000 in the first half of the year, and I don't know, $400,000 in the second half of the year. What do you think? Well, first of all, let me stop and say that 200 and that 400, you just calculated an annual burn rate. Problem is, remarkably imprecisely, because you don't really know what you're going to achieve. They're just a couple of numbers. Now, I will confide in you, when I taught entrepreneurial finance, and my students would hand in their assignment, and I would look at them and I realized they just did one of those two things. And I'd say, here's what you guys just did. And they'd look at me and they'd be like, dude, were you in our study group last night? And the answer is yes. Not too long ago, I was in your study group last night. But then I learned the way to go about doing this is by identifying milestones and by calculating the cost of how much it's going to take to achieve those milestones. So what are we going to do here? What are we going to do differently? We're going to write a milestone-driven financial plan. By identifying the milestones, in your plan, we can calculate your burn rate. Going back, we had 4 words that I introduced in the beginning, which were constraints, plan, milestones, and assumptions. New word though, process. The fact is, within your plan, there are multiple processes. I'll name a couple. Product development, clinical data. Okay, these are processes that are ongoing throughout your life cycle. But what we're going to do is identify the relevant milestones within those processes and others. Remember, a milestone-driven plan is the way to calculate your burn rate, because a milestone-driven plan is what investors want. Why? Investors are buying milestones. Why? Because with every milestone, you're increasing value and decreasing risk. By dividing your plan into processes, and then by identifying milestones along the way with those processes, and quantifying those milestones through assumptions to address constraints of time and money, we calculate your burn rate. Now, also keep in mind that some of these processes will be concurrent. Some of them will be in serial. And if that sounds like it's really complicated, let me remind you, like going back to Module 1, you do this all the time. Let me give you an example. Getting your child and you ready in the morning and going off to school and work. So first, you have 2 parallel processes of getting yourselves ready. Then, you have a milestone of getting out the door. After that, you have a single process of getting your child to school, followed by another single process of getting yourself to work. I point out this simple example because you know how to do this, and you know how to identify processes that are both in parallel and in serial. So let's start with a simple plan. I'm going to identify a process and a single milestone and a few assumptions. So here's an example for you. Let's try product development. Okay? So product development is an ongoing process probably throughout your venture's life cycle. Gen 1, Gen 2, Gen 3 product. So that's the process. Let's pick a milestone of your first working prototype. Okay? So there's your milestone. And let's identify a few assumptions. Okay, assumption number 1 is you're going to have to buy some instrumentation. So let's say you've identified that the instrumentation is going to cost $350,000. Now, you need some people to build your prototype for you. So you're going to have to hire full-time a mechanical engineer, and that person's going to cost $100,000. Then you're going to hire part-time a software engineer, and that person's going to cost $40,000. You're also going to need, let's say part-time, a manufacturing engineer to make sure you can scale this thing up, and that person, part-time, is going to cost $20,000. So in order to get to this prototype, you're going to spend on people $160,000 in the course of the year. But you also are going to have to use a prototyping house, an outsourced prototyping house. Now they estimate that each iteration of making a prototype for you is going to cost $30,000. Now, as much as you and I would love for one iteration to succeed, let's plan on 4. 4 iterations of going to the prototyping house, with each one costing $30,000 for a total of $120,000. When you add up all these numbers, we're looking at $630,000 to burn to achieve in 1 year the milestone of a working prototype. Let's pick a second example. Let's try clinical data. Okay, once again, probably an ongoing process for the life of your venture. First milestone you might want to achieve is clinical validation. You have to run a small clinical trial. Okay, let's look at some assumptions. You have identified 4 locations. You're going to need 4 locations in which to run the trial. You've also figured out it's going to take a full 9 months. So 9 months of finding the patients and running the trial with the patients. Okay, next thing, each location is going to cost, you estimate, $300,000 to $450,000 for each location, 4 locations. So for this milestone, which is clinical validation, 9 months, we're looking at $1.8 million. to achieve that milestone in 9 months. I just mentioned a couple of assumptions just now. The fact is, you could find 20, 30, or 40 assumptions for each milestone that you have to reach. So in this case, you've got to take those assumptions to build the milestone and then weave those into your processes. And there's going to be several processes concurrently that are ongoing. For simplicity's sake, just to be clear, I just identified one assumption just now. Now, next question you might ask is, fine, I understand, where do I get all this information? Well, remember I mentioned customer discovery before? First place you go, always, is back to your customers. So ask your customers and all those stakeholders about these assumptions for you to achieve milestones, identifying milestones, and what are the assumptions to get there. After your customers, the next obvious place to go is your vendors. Always go to your vendors. They're selling into your marketplace. They're probably selling right to your customers, who knows, and they're probably selling to your competitors as well. And while we're on the subject of competitors, always talk to your competitors. You'll find out so much. Don't put your head in the sand. Talk to them. You'll find out a great amount. Fourth, go to your investors. Your investors have an interest in what you're doing. They're the ones that will actually help you identify relevant milestones of what they want you to achieve. Fifth, this fifth source of information is possibly the most rich of all. While you're talking to customers, vendors, etc., you're also going to learn about companies to whom they compare you. We call those comparables. I know, not very creative. So they're going to say, oh, you're doing something like such and such company which has maybe a similar device or a similar, going after a similar indication or has a similar business model to you. So these comparables are other companies. They could be still existing or they could have already been sold or maybe they even died, but they have rich amounts of information. So what you want to do is talk to these people and gather the data for your assumptions, as many primary and secondary assumptions as you can get your hands on. Fill in the gaps with tertiary if you have to. But more importantly, also identify the relevant milestones for what you need to achieve, because by putting together all of your assumptions, weaving them into milestones and then processes, you can calculate your burn rate. I'm going to identify another process, and we're going to talk about one that researchers really don't like to talk about. Sales. I know, ew, sales. Nobody likes to talk about sales, especially researchers. But the fact is, if you're not selling anything, you don't have yourself a business. And sales is something that extends through the life of your venture. So if let's identify your milestone as your first sale. When are you going to get to your first sale? What's that going to take? Now, I can't tell you when that's going to happen, but here's where we can make some assumptions, which is this. The average sales cycle from the first time you meet a customer till that customer writes a check, that can take 18 months. Okay, so there's one assumption. Next assumption, who's going to actually do the sales? Well, you're going to have to hire a salesperson. Let's say that person costs $80,000 a year plus a commission to be determined. But you know the base salary is $80,000 a year. Second, you're going to have to send a technical person, a technician perhaps from your lab, to those meetings with the salesperson to help close the sale. That's another person. That person's going to cost, let's say, $100,000 a year. Third, very subtle point here. Your lawyer, your corporate counsel may have to draft the contracts that you're going to have to write for each one of those sales. And usually with each one, there's a little bit of language and negotiation, so you're going to need your counselor. And let's say your counselor costs $400 an hour. Now, you have a mishmash of talent here. You maybe have a dedicated salesperson, but let's say that technical person also works in the laboratory. Okay, a couple of other assumptions you're going to have to figure out. How many sales calls, how many meetings, how many emails is it going to take to close one sale? Another assumption you're going to have to figure out. How many customers in the pipeline can your salesperson handle at once? 2, 5, 100? Remember, customers are going to come and go from your pipeline. What I want to point out is that the sales process is not as linear as, say, the product development process. It's more complex. There are many more moving parts. Now, what's going to happen is this. Actually, as it evolves, that sales process is going to evolve into a sales plan. I know, I just said sales plan. And you're thinking, hold on, how many plans am I writing? Well, today you're writing one with several processes. But the fact is, as your venture matures, you're going to end up writing a sales plan, an operating plan, and a marketing plan. But today, to keep it simple, at this level of just getting started, we're just going to call them processes. Now, I identified just now 3 processes. These are ongoing processes that go on for the life of your company. And we've also learned that within each of those processes, we're going to segment into milestones. And the goal here is to calculate the burn rate to achieve each of those milestones. But now here's what you can do with that information. Let's say you want to answer the question of what's going to be my burn rate for a given quarter. Let's say 2018, second quarter 2018. What's going to be my burn rate that quarter? Well, by looking at this, you can look at the ongoing processes, overlapping ongoing processes during that quarter. And you can add up the burn rates of each of those processes in the course of that quarter. And by summing them up, you get a total burn rate for second quarter 18. Let me point out one of the most powerful aspects of this approach. All entrepreneurs want to know how much money to raise. So usually what we do is we ask, how much money should I raise? Well, the answer is in your milestone-driven plan. Let your milestones guide you to determine how much money you should raise. Here's how you do it. Talk to your investors. Your investors and you will identify what's the top milestone, perhaps what's the top 3 milestones that they value most. Knowing that, you can calculate how much money you should raise. Keep in mind, the first draft of anything is never the final draft. So you're probably going to have to rewrite this a few times. It's a collaborative process with you and your investors. You'll show them a draft and they'll refine it with you, and you'll go back and bring it to them again. Now, for my current company, I actually had to write 4 financial plans. The first 3 times I showed them to my investors, in very technical financial talk, they said, nah, we don't like this. But they told me what they didn't like, so I refined it and brought it back to them, and the 4th time was a charm. What's an example of what might change? Well, let's say one investor values customer validation. That's the milestone the investor wants you to meet. Another investor may say, well, actually, I value clinical validation, and that's the milestone for that investor you want to meet. A third investor may say, I don't have as much money as those guys, so you're going to want to identify an interim milestone for that investor to buy. So whether you're shifting priorities, whether you're shifting milestones, whether you're shifting timelines, your milestone-driven plan allows you to be flexible with understanding and calculate how much money to raise to meet the demands of your investors. What's our objective for these modules? Our objective is to set you up to succeed. Today, I outlined 3 processes. For each one, I named 1 milestone and a few assumptions. By no stretch was this designed to be comprehensive. It was designed to focus your attention on just how much work goes into making a comprehensive, rigorous financial plan. The fact is, you may identify 5 or even 15 different processes for your venture. But by implementing these systematic and repeatable steps that we use today to quantify assumptions in order to calculate milestone burn rates, you can apply that methodology across all of the processes that you've identified. And you can even do it with something as complex as your sales process.